Thank you very much for showing up for this very much timely and auspicious briefing session. As you've all aware, we've just concluded the agreement, the permanent cessation of building peace in Ethiopia. Ethiopians have been traveled. A lot of friends have been with us all through. We had been in ups and downs to bring about peace in Ethiopia, and it's been like 2 years. While a conflict which should have been avoided, which could have been avoided, but unfortunately that we found ourselves in a continuous back and forth conflict, so a lot of opportunities that we had to embrace peace. Now we hope many of us have learned the hard way after we burnt our fingers. But again, this agreement, though, it opened a window of opportunities for many. We all are aware that also that it needs nurturing, cooperation, understanding from all corners. Peace has all friends and beneficiaries. No one will lose nothing from peace, but unfortunately, it's human nature. Not everybody would be happier, or not everybody would be cooperative in building peace process. And so we'll brief you how we've been through in all this process, and also the steps that we've been taken and expectations from our partners, and next steps of implementation that the government is trying to bring about to move forward. The AU Commission has done an excellent job from the inception to the conclusion. The Republic of South Africa provided the most ideal conditions for the talks. AU high-level panel led by His Excellency Obasanjo and supported by Kenyatta and Dr. Fumzile provided wisdom and patiently guided the process to the successful conclusion. We thank all partners who supported this process as observers. We might not agree on everything, but many partners provided valuable advice. It is time also now to revitalize relationships since the conflict is over. Diplomatic community in the past on our preparation. The high-level peace committee guided the process. The parties handled most issues directly. We designed a small working group format to work on texts. The discussions were cordial and substantive. The AU-level panel was instrumental in the critical areas. The minor difficult issues were resolved with no leave room for conflicting interpretations. As such, the process was thorough. There had been several back and forths. Uhuru Kenyatta has played a very much instrumental role in bringing us together at times of very much difficulties. So we made it through assistance of our colleagues. Also the very commitment from both sides to somehow break the deal and then to put the conflict behind us and move forward. Because on both sides we've seen the colossal damage that has brought up on our people. So there was a will, but we understood also challenges, because on both sides there were perceptions, misperceptions, and a huge deficit of trust. So we both agreed on the process and the imperative of resolving the conflict and reach to certain kind of deal to extricate our people from the quagmire of conflict. But there had been serious mistrust, and so we had to shuttle several times so that we have to come up on the same page. And the panels have played very much instrumental role. But again, basically, we alone, both sides, had to discuss in Amharic because we know each other. We know at times of difficulties, we know also times of jubilees. So it would be easier for us because most of us would know personally with erstwhile friends. So we're also eager to create that mood so that we could collaborate to help our country move forward and unshackle the problems that we've been through. With regard to contents of the agreement, The agreement contains a preamble explaining our determination to resolve the conflict peacefully, with objectives, principles serving as lasting commitments, some of which are detailed in the agreement, others are self-executing, such as respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ethiopia and upholding the federal constitution. So we had to agree on the objectives first, and it was easier. And then we had to agree on the principles, and that guided us to deliberate on the contents, which also gave us the right framework. Others, such as permanently silencing the guns, restoring the constitutional order in the Tigray region, respecting federal authority, or that Ethiopia has only one national defense force, are provided with implementing provisions. Some of the provisions with immediate implementation included the following. First, we've agreed to stop fighting immediately and permanently. Second, we've agreed to stop hostile propaganda and rhetoric. Third, the ANDF will enter into Mekelle. This has multiple reasons. Fourth, an open channel of communication between senior commanders would be established. Fifth, we will implement a DDR program for the TPLF combatants. With regard to stop fighting immediately and permanently, the word is ceasefire, stop cessation of hostilities. There are a lot of practices and semantics, but we've agreed to avoid semantics and focus on the essence because the issue is closer to us than the prior experiences. So we took lessons, but we focused on our own context. So that's why in some corners the issue was bandied as first cessation of hostilities, then to work on the permanent ceasefire. But for us, that would entail having a luxury of time. So we said we have to stop fighting immediately, and that has to entail a permanent ceasefire because we don't have to just stop fighting for now and then keep on talking, whereby either of us might have an excuse to revert back to the conflict. So everything has to be concluded then. That's why it took us more than a week. So that has to be dealt with, and I think it was to the best interest of both sides, particularly the people on the ground who've been undergoing the challenges and sustained colossal damage. The sixth was the TPLF will respect the authority of the federal government to deploy the NDF and other law enforcement agencies because that is the prerogative of the federal government under the federal constitution. Then the issues that federal government has been fighting was also to ensure law and order and to uphold constitution. And so it was to the best interest of both sides if the country has to hold on and continue. Seventh, the TPLF will stop conduct that undermines the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ethiopia, including unconstitutional correspondence and relations with foreign powers, because external relations under federal constitution only falls under the ambits of federal government, and no regional authority is allowed to form relations. As the government on its part will continue restoring services and expediting humanitarian aid. This was not part of the negotiation, but because the agreement would pave the way and avoid the problems, then we had to put that the agreement that we've reached would also pave the way for a smooth flow of aid without anybody would have an excuse to trample with the flow of aid. The 10th was ANDF shall safeguard all of Ethiopia's international borders and also airspace, because during the conflict we faced on both sides, from the air and on the ground, that our territorial integrity and borders were violated. So we are busy fighting each other, we're busy undermining each other. That paved the way for a third party to undermine us further. So the only way we saved the country was to avoid such opportunities for a third party to undermine us, and because safeguarding the border, international border and airspace, belongs to the federal government, and so federal government has to assume responsibility. For that, we had to agree, and that was also provided within the agreement. 11th point was the federal government will take control of federal institutions in Tigray. There are a lot of federal institutions, airports, airstrips, both economic and social infrastructures. And so for that, the federal government has to have access and easy control without resistance, and that was also agreed. It doesn't undermine the other party because it already was prerogative of the federal government, and it only meant to be understood by both sides. 13th, agreed to a mechanism to monitor the implementation of permanent cessation of hostilities, led by the AU high-level panel and supported by African experts. We provided how many experts might be adequate, and then also with other technological assistance. So the execution of this agreement must be monitored well and verified, and that has to be honor justice. Because one of the triggering factors, at least the factors that add for both sides to fall out, was the holding of election, which was outside the constitution in Tigray. And that was also one of the elements which put federal government and TPLF at odds. So that had to be sorted out once we've agreed to uphold federal constitution and also to respect federal authorities. So we need actually the election to be held in Tigray, because the people, our people in Tigray, must be also represented in the Parliament and House of Federation, and that could only be through the election which could be held by the Federal National Board of Election. So for that, election must be held, but until election could be held, then we need to have interim administration. That administration must be also inclusive. There are a lot of political parties in Tigray too, including now, once this agreement holds and once we move forward, the federal government would approach the parliament to reconsider the designation of the terrorism of the TPLF. Then there may be opportunities for TPLF to run as a civil political party than both armed and civilian wing. So any political party that is armed itself could not run for election, because having access to coercive rules belongs to the elected government. So once a party is elected, then once controls the government, regional or federal, then you have access to use those arms. But you cannot be armed while you are a political party. So that's why some friends might be confused when we say disarmament of TPLF, then we are not denying the right of the region of Tigray to have arms. Regions have arms that are standardized. Federal government can hold arms, which is stipulated in laws. Then the Tigray region can have also those arms, adequate police force, adequate special force, adequate militia. That is pertinent to the land area of the Tigray to control, and the population to police. It has to correspond with that. But again, that belongs to the regional government of Tigray, not to a particular party, because there are almost 5 political parties, and none of them could have access to arms unless they are elected and be in office. So that is the logic when we say that. Political dialogue, we have political issues which strictly fall between federal government or Prosperity Party and TPLF, but others which are pertinent to the national import, or those which are not pertinent to TPLF and the government would be dealt by the National Inclusive Dialogue, which now we are handling. Issues which are only pertinent to TPLF and the government or Prosperity Party could be handled bilaterally between both parties after moving forward. Transitional justice assumes it has both parts. One, that the conflict now transcended into the damage, the ripple effect has affected civilians. It has also affected the social fabrics. And then we have to induce the process of healing. And we have to also nurture our social fabrics for the community to pull together. The other aspect, it has also entails accountability, because some of atrocities committed cannot simply be foregone in the pretext of cessation of hostility with the pretext of also transitional justice. That includes both accountability and then again nurturing social cohesion and healing and forgiveness process. Issues could not only be dealt with in courts. Some social aspects must be dealt with communal discussions and forgiveness and reconciliation. So we also would like to embrace on that, and we've agreed upon these aspects. Next steps in the implementation of the agreement. Some of these steps require immediate action, such as opening channel of communication between senior commanders. We sent the phone number of our Chief of Staff, Field Marshal Brano Jula, to the TPLF side. They did not call, and then again we received their part yesterday. We also passed that for our Chief of Staff last evening. I did not check, but they must have talked. At least from our side, we vow to begin to start every process to move ahead and to show the lead. The other second aspect is once the commanders opened communication channel, in 5 days, in the agreement it was indicated that commanders must meet and discuss as to how to implement the agreement. Now we are going to head to Nairobi as of tomorrow, and both commanders will meet in Nairobi on Monday. Then they will sort out the agreement which is indicated to be dealt with by the fighting forces, particularly in the armed areas. For other activities such as DDR, we've included maximum times limit, outer bound for heavy weapons, disarmament and light weapons for the TPLF combatants. We have reasonable time for TPLF to hand over heavy armaments which do not belong to any region, which could not and should not be belong to any political party. That has to be handed over to our army. And light weapons could be collected. The amount adequate for Tigray region will remain there and to be handed over for the government, which would be formed first transitional administration and then for the permanent Tigray regional administration after the election under the constitutional manner could be held. Here the fact is we've agreed on total disarmament, on demobilization and reintegration. We will quickly move to agree on a plan. It needs a detailed plan. So once the commanders would meet, then that will also require civilian leadership. So we'll work on this process, but it's also agreed, which paved the way. We've already started publicizing the agreement. Our people are massively celebrating the agreement. The Prime Minister had set the tone once the agreement was signed. Yesterday, the Prime Minister presided over the regional presidents, ministers at the federal and party officials. So the decision he passed and directions he gave was, it's unfortunate that we've been fighting. All the losses had been minus from Ethiopia. All the losses weakened us. So we've sustained colossal damage. Now, it's not time now to keep on leaking the wounds, but we have to move forward and rekindle hope back to our people. For that, regions have vowed to solicit resources from their own to assist areas which are afflicted by the conflict, both in the Amhara-Afar region and particularly also in Tigray region, because most of the conflict was being run there, even though parts of Amhara and parts of Afar region have been affected. Of course, areas which have been affected by the conflict are many. We have in Gambela, we have in Benshangul, we have in Oromia region. So those regions could at least be better off on their own, though they also need some assistance from our partners, federal government. But now, as a basis to also rekindle hope and also reignite that social bond, regions would solicit resources to go and help the people in Tigray. That also reconnects the social fabrics. Again, federal government would do its best to solicit resources. Our partners would also be encouraged now to move in, because I think that I had the estimate yesterday from our finance minister. It would require like nearly $20 billion to bring back the entire loss, both in the schools, livelihoods, education facilities, health facilities, roads. So it's colossal damage we sustained. Imagine that could have been uplifting the country had we sat together, because we've been calling for this. In the end, no matter how we keep on killing each other, in the end we'll sit down and talk. So that's why the government has been given those opportunities multiple times. And the last time, as you remember, government said it is ready to sit and talk without preconditions anywhere, so long as it is led by Africa. That is our unflinching position. And I think you would agree that we are proven right. We are vindicated. We have adequate wisdom. The only thing Africa does not have is a resource that could immediately be used. And both in ideas, in wisdoms, in resources, we are good. And so the fact that we don't have immediate resource to utilize does not mean that we are void of ideas and wisdoms. Now, but I think that we are vindicated. So we were right when we are calling upon Pan-Africanism and respect for African values, because we are a communal society. That's how we manage conflicts. And then governments are parts of the community. So if communities are well aversing in conflicts and have wisdoms to come to agreements in many parts of African communities, that is a lesson enough to also guide governments. And I think that's what our panelists did when they were helping us to come together in this conflict. So that is true. Then again, for reconstruction, we plead our partners to come up on this so that we can move forward and help communities. We have already started this agreement. We've managed our media not to aggravate differences. All the public media are being briefed so that they will keep on only focus on the dividends of peace. But that does not mean that we have every element in the media that would embrace peace agreement, because many from all corners may wish to focus on the parts which they think should have been included, or which they think somebody must be penalized, or which they think they should have got more than their share. And so because of that, we'll have a lot of disgruntled groups, both within the armed groups, also in the civilian, and a third party who might have been being benefited from the conflict. So we are very much aware that we must be also mindful of those difficulties. It was easier to ignite the conflict, but it might be tough to keep on this peace process. But from the government side, we are trying our best, and the Prime Minister is very much keen on this and watching every step of every actors, particularly from the government side, and we are encouraging also the TPLF side. We are now in very much continuous communication, whereby we find out something worth noticing. So we are sharing information so that we will not relapse back to the conflict out of misunderstanding. We shall quickly address any hiccups that might arise in the implementation. Expectations from our friends and partners. Ethiopia's friends and partners are welcoming the agreement. Many are interested to support reconstruction and rebuilding effort. As you know, the Tigray region is affected most by the conflict. The government is committed to put its resources to rebuild the region. The needs are significant with an estimate of resource requirements. We shall be reaching out to our partners to lend their support. It is important that all members of this community support the agreement. We will not accept second guessing. The two sides agreed. The country must move forward. We also need to revitalize relations with partners. Some keep on trying to indulge in their wildness. Some still think as if we have not agreed yet. They think it was just immediate ceasefire, and then we have to again continue for another agreement. So there is no such a thing. We've agreed, and then we vowed to move forward. And what we expect from partners is to let us move, at least to let us move, but at best to support us move. So with us, we plead to your understanding on these patterns. So far, we've begun already reconnecting services in a lot of areas, particularly through the Alamata. We are reconnecting telecoms and also electricity with other areas, particularly from the western part. The maintenance is undergoing, so we'll quickly fix both telecoms and electricity soon. With regards to aid, the government has begun supplying aid, both medicine and food, from its own resources. We also understand partners are ready to move in. The only hiccups we have is, though the agreement is now reached, it is still risky to allow flights until commanders would meet and assess the situation. Bad apples could be in our force, bad apples could be in the TPLF force. We don't know who might want to scuttle this agreement. So it might not be the government, it might not be TPLF as a leadership, but we may have disgruntled elements from both sides. And we may also have a third party which may not be interested in this peace process. So for now, until the commanders will assess next week and the situation whether it is safe to allow flighters, if both commanders from both TPLF and government would agree, then we'll notify for our partners to begin flying. But through ground, the Afar route would still be quickly assessed, and then we allow the aid to move in. But with the areas that still federal government defense forces have now controlled, aid is flowing, and that could be intensified. As per the agreement, if the commanders would agree on the timeline and planning, once the federal government would control the airports, also navigation system, and the airspace fully, then we will allow the aid to flow both on the ground and from the air. So the entire Tigrayan region would be accessible for aid, because then we'll find out, the commanders will find out a way to collaborate even before the total disarmament and handing off areas would be completed. These are the fundamental pointers. Thank you very much for you listening.
Whereby accountability through the transitional justice system will kick in. Second, we are talking about the DDR. And I think that unless we focus on those, you may find that we slip back into the conflict. We would like to encourage the government as much as possible to ensure that at the end of it all, the underlying, I think that the issue we are really trying to raise, Excellency, is that it is important to encourage you to move forward speedily. If the timelines you have set are achieved, you know that there is not much time for people to try to go back. That is one of the key issues, and I had already talked about the transitional justice, so that it is how it is formulated. I'm glad the Minister of Justice is here, who would be able to probably has ideas about how that will unfold. And the whole question of DDR, we have to avoid also the question of those forces who would be opposed to this agreement, trying to, at the end of it all, track us back. Ethiopia is too important to fail. I think it is also important to thank the facilitators It was an incredible job which to have completed all that within 10 days is remarkable. And the government and people of South Africa for having hosted this. These are how we as Africans should be able to work together to ensure that at the end of it all, we can solve our problems. Whoever needs to assist, but we are the ones who are solving our problems. I thank you.
Of Japan would like to welcome this peace agreement as an initial step towards the peace and stability in Ethiopia and its surrounding countries. And we commend the efforts made by all the people concerned, including African Union and South Africa, US, UN, and others. But it is also very necessary that all parties concerned will faithfully and quickly implement the agreement. And Japan is ready to continue to work with Ethiopia, together with our partner countries, for the peace and the stability in this country. I have a quick question and some suggestions. Regarding disarmament, you mentioned that you have put out the maximum time limit. But in terms of the monitoring and the verification team of African experts, I was not quite clear what would be the time frame for establishing this team of experts. Unless this monitoring is done, we are not sure how the ceasefire cessation of hostilities has been observed. So if you have any time frame for establishing this monitoring team, I certainly appreciate. Another time frame that I was not quite clear is the restoration of essential services.
Rural electrification operation, close to $100 million. It has been going well, but of course, over the years, it has stalled. We also have the 4 towns water project, which is Mekele, Adama, Gode, Bichena. The Mekele component stalled. We are the pioneers also in the integrated agro-industrial parks. And you know it has 4 locations. One of them is Tigray. 2 years ago, we approved close to $100 million. So we are really very pleased, and we are looking forward very much to the time when we'll be able to enter this region and see our operations. Thank you.
HRJ, because my ambassador is on leave until next week. Your Excellency, Ambassador, my President, His Excellency General Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, congratulate the people and government of Ethiopia for signing this important peace agreement last week in Pretoria, South Africa. Your Excellency, as you may know, the people of the Republic of South Sudan and their brothers and sisters here in Ethiopia do not only share the border, but also they share culture, people, and the language. Our people in both Ethiopia and South Sudan strongly believe that a peaceful Ethiopia will also be a peaceful South Sudan. My President in the Republic of South Sudan call on all Ethiopia, those who are in the country and those who are outside the country, to join hands together with His Excellency, the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, to implement this important peace agreement. Your Excellency, as we always said, African problems should always be resolved by the Africans. The Republic of South Sudan highly appreciates and thanks the leadership of the African Union under His Excellency Musa Faki Mohamed for the job well done. What they did in South Africa, it has shown all Africans, all the problem in Africa will be resolved by the Africans. Thank you.
Excellencies, I just want to congratulate for this agreement, as my country is very celebrating this achievement after 2 years of this conflict, and of course we are attached to the peaceful resolution of this conflict. My question is regarding the some threats that still is not included in the agreement. After the agreement that you reached in South Africa, some sources mentioned it, some activities of the Oromo Liberation Army and some attacks and also kidnapping some members of the government. What will be the position in this context of the peace talks? And the second is if you have you mentioned the next steps and the roadmap, but you have a deadline for the most urgent things like the restoration of the services in Mekelle. And the third will be if will be any election of the authorities of the Tigray remain the same. Thank you very much.
On my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Pakistan, 220 million people, and the government of Pakistan, I wish to extend my congratulations on this landmark achievement in signing the agreement between the two parties. I would personally appreciate the efforts of His Excellency Mr. Rizwan Hussain for conducting this entire negotiation and led the country to a successful conclusion. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed deserves a lot of appreciation, and please convey our good wishes to him. On the details of the agreement, as it has not yet been revealed to the public, I would request that this should be an official copy of the agreement should be provided to us so that we can convey it to our government accordingly. And secondly, the most important is the component of reconstruction of Tigray. And I believe that we have, Pakistan have been to this process, and we believe that we as a developing partner, as a strong bilateral partner with Ethiopia, Pakistan would wish to contribute in the development of the reconstruction and redevelopment of Tigray region. I think that the government of Ethiopia would provide some details that which kind of a support and assistance would immediately be required for that purpose. Pakistan would welcome that and looking forward to have more closer partnership with Ethiopia. Thank you.
You just forgive people, or there will actually going to be a trial for people to be, held accountable for human rights violations they committed during the conflict. Thank you.
Agreed upon the protection of civilians, particularly vulnerable groups, and there is a clear language that addresses this issue. When it comes to transitional justice, the agreement clearly stipulates that the transitional justice policy that would be adapted and that would be implemented should comply with the African Union Transitional Justice Policy Framework. So we'll have a deliberative, participatory, and transparent process through which all stakeholders will have a say, will have a contribution, will have their input, and we intend to put in place an appropriate amnesty through a truth-telling and reconciliation process. So any transitional justice mechanism we would put in place, as has been stipulated in the agreement, would meet international standards, international requirements. There will not be any blanket amnesty, and there will not be any impunity. There will be accountability, be it for criminal accountability or other forms of accountability as appropriate. But in the coming weeks, we intend to release a white paper, actually a green paper for a transitional justice mechanism. It will be subject to deliberation and discussion throughout the country. We don't intend the transitional justice policy to work only in the context of the conflict that has occurred in the northern part of the country. We want to envisage, what we envisage is a more comprehensive transitional justice approach. So you'll hear more details about this process in the coming days. So that's as far as accountability is concerned. Another issue I would quickly address is for some of the issues there are timelines, there are deadlines. But one thing that I would like to point out is, although some of these activities are supposed to be time-bound, there is also some inbuilt flexibility. So both parties, depending on the circumstances, depending on practical considerations, particularly the senior military commanders of both sides, when they work out the detailed plan for the disarmament, they could make recommendations for extensions, and if the activity requires an extension, both parties could agree for an extension. So it is time-bound, there are deadlines, but these deadlines could be extended based on the recommendation of the senior commanders and the endorsement of the political leadership on both sides. But there are also activities that are indicated in this agreement for which we have not stipulated deadlines. What that implies is we will accomplish these tasks as quickly as possible. Some of these activities, some of these tasks are activities that we have already started. These are activities that we have already that are underway. So when it comes to restoration of services, when it comes to humanitarian aid, as far as these issues are concerned, sometimes when you put a deadline, if you say 1 month or 2 weeks, there is a tendency in some agencies, okay, I have 2 weeks, I could accomplish it. If I accomplish it at the end of the second week, then I have made the deadline. But for these issues, we don't want that kind of mentality to delay the implementation. As soon as the senior military commanders work out some of the security details, as soon as there is a more enabling environment, we'll do everything within our power to ensure that services will be restored as quickly as humanly possible. So that's one of the reasons why we have not provided deadlines. The other issue I would like to point out is this agreement is between the TPLF and the federal government. However, there are clear provisions prohibiting the cessation of hostilities provision under the agreement. Clearly provides that indirect or covert activities through any proxy to destabilize the other party is prohibited. So it's not just fighting in outright direct confrontation that is prohibited, but hostilities and violence indirectly through proxies, through other subversive groups is also prohibited. So that's something that I would like to underline. So these are the points that I wanted to address. Thank
you much. I would also augment my colleague with some of connected energy, and then roads will be built. On the other areas, maintenance is underway. We hope we'll finish it. So it's not something that we put on the agreement so that we'll agree on how to resume it. It's been ongoing. I was just we're suggesting on the areas whereby federal government did not have access, now after the agreement and as of next week, so the commanders will come up with the details of security issues and then we'll move on. So it's not something that is put to be done in the future. It's an ongoing process. With the issue of the official copy, we made it public. It's on my Twitter account, and I think Minister of Foreign Affairs have also shared it, because we had a lot of draft came with a different idea, then we had to negotiate, then we have to come up with mini draft, and some people got access with drafts which are not signed, and that might also mislead and give impression something that is as if it was agreed, even though it was not part of the agreed and signed upon document. So you can access those agreed upon documents from the websites of Government Communication Services, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and my also Twitter account, and maybe the other party, TPLF, could also have put some so that people will not be confused, because there are a lot of people who might have their own impression about the agreement, and they try to twist and misconstrue the very spirit of this agreement so that they can keep on marking the water. Otherwise, it is available. Removing the cash and the aid is still flowing on the areas that our defense forces have access. And when our defense forces have been moving, we also had police force and civil administration. The difficulty was on the areas where there was intense fighting, it was not physically possible. The other difference, as you might notice, was because we had a complaint as a government, aid was being siphoned to rearm and also to feed combatants and the very needy people. So one of the requests was federal government should also have presence in the aid, because we have to make sure it should not be left for one party to just deal with everything. Our aid agencies, our aid partners, and government itself has to be there to make sure that those hungry are fed, than it's used to prolong the conflict. So that was the request. Now we've read agreement, and then government will have access as of next week in all areas. Maybe in some areas they may come up with a mechanism whereby they can divide share roles as to which areas to be handled by either party, and then we'll come up with a detailed plan as to how to reach to the people for the aid. Otherwise, we've been in serious contact with WFP, USAID, and other partners. Until that happens, we are sending our own resources, particularly medicine and food, in the areas where our defense forces have access, like all the way to Aksum, Shire, and from here all the way to Alamada, aid is going. The problem is near Mekelle and beyond Mekelle. Now that could also be accessed very well, and then we'll coordinate to make sure that every people there which have been affected by the conflict would have access food and aid without strings attached. That was also the conflict that we were making. You don't have to be forced to give something so that you can get the aid. Now every area would be free, and all the actors could witness. Then all the people could have easy access without they will be required to give something for them to get access for the aid. The monitoring, we've indicated for monitoring and verification, it is indicated in the agreement. African Union would take the lead. The panelists would have also the leadership. We've indicated certain number, I think 10 experts from African countries would be deployed, and there will be a satellite kind of technology for AU to solicit from which satellite they might use. So it's easier to pinpoint every movement on the ground once we've agreed. So we've stipulated, and it's for the African Union to come up with the details. Otherwise, the agreement has indicated it has to be monitored, it has to be verified, and those who would wish to break have to be accountable, because we cannot afford to relapse back to conflict anymore. That does not mean that there will not be elements who wish to make that happen. But we as a leadership, I think, mostly from the TPLF side, we will see most of them we thought have learned, and then now they are trying to move, but it doesn't mean that every one of them would be happy. It doesn't mean that also from our side, every individual, though the government is committed, it doesn't mean every element would be that happy. So it has to be monitored. It has to be verified, and we have to be notified immediately so that we can rectify it instead of keep on complaining. And by the time we realize the conflict already is erupted. Finally, we'd like to thank again all our partners, all our friends, even those with whom we have some differences as to how to handle this conflict. We wish and we are committed to revitalize the relationship and to keep on building the nation rather than keep on squabbling and harping on the differences that we had. Now, if we had similar concerns, safety of Ethiopia, security of Ethiopia, development of Ethiopia, and then now it's time to pull together than focusing on the difficulties that we had in the past. We also hope this barrage of media campaign on Ethiopia would cease, and we hope they would give us a break now. We also hope those who made a name out of the conflict in Africa, who made a name out of a conflict in the Horn, I think they will be jobless, so they have to find something nice rather than trading on the conflict and the misery of the people. We also hope that we will not be called in the Security Council for difficulties, but will be called on the areas where we cooperate to bring peace not only in Ethiopia, but also elsewhere, as we used to do it before. So the assistance was good in many parties. Those who helped us in Geneva, in Security Council, also in African Union, thank you for understanding our difficulties, and thank you also for standing by. Even those whom we have differences with, we share some of their concerns. We only had disagreement with the context and the dynamics. Otherwise, the concern is appreciated, and now it is time that we have to move forward, assisting each other. So it's time for us to embrace. USA has been instrumental in this, to bringing TPLF, to convince TPLF, to pressurizing TPLF to come to the table in multiple times, and also all the way to South Africa. With that also, we are grateful. With our choices of observers, we had very strong belief that Africa can handle it. And then the other aspect was it has to be multilateral, IGAD and UN. Those are, Ethiopia has a membership, and they can demand assistance from them. The rest, we were afraid we'll end up listing a number of countries than with the contenders and the negotiators. So that's why we do not wish to involve individual countries, but so if you keep on bringing one country, then the other will continue. If you begin that, we'll end up like tens of 20, 30, 40 partner countries. So it will not be proper to invite one and deny the other. With EU, we understand we have to make clear that we still have to continue our strategic partnership. It has to do with an individual who was leading the international relationship. Otherwise, with the development aspect, we are okay, we are fine. We are grateful for that. But with regard to the international aspect, it's only one individual. We still keep on second-guessing this agreement, but still we appreciate the EU statement. Still, we have to continue. We are very much grateful that the assistance will continue. We are very much grateful and hopeful that our strategic partnership will continue on that line, and we also would like to iron out some of the differences we had on this line. Otherwise, European Union has also been with us on several occasions all the way through, particularly the development aspect, and it's not because we don't appreciate the assistance. It's because we were very much committed that this negotiation had to be successful. So we did not want to bring individuals with vested interests. We're also happier with the special envoy, Annette Weber. Nothing to do with her. She was great. Her effort was appreciated. It's only some differences from her back. It might be beyond her capacity to positively contribute on the process, and also our commitment to remain with the IGAD and UN that we focused on that line. Otherwise, we are very much grateful for all you, and thank you very much.